Ever find yourself wondering, like, why we even have VE governments? Like, who gave them the right to tell us what to do?
It's a question people have been wrestling with for ages, right?
Totally. So today we're diving into the origins of government, where that power comes from, ethically speaking. And we've got some seriously big brains to help us out along the way.
Oh, yeah. We're talking classics excerpts from Hobbes's Leviathan, Locke's Second Treatise.
Even Nozick's Anarchy, State, and Utopia, that title alone always throws me for a loop.
And to bring in a slightly more modern perspective, we've got Nussbaum's Women and Human Development. Should be interesting to see how those connect.
Talk about a range. But let's rewind for a sec, start at the beginning, which in this case means Hobbes. Dude was writing during the English Civil War, not exactly a walk in the park.
Understatement of the century. You really sense that chaos in Leviathan?
Right. He paints this picture of what he calls the state of nature, basically. What life would be like without government.
And spoiler alert, it's not pretty. He literally calls it solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short.
Cheery fellow, that Hobbes.
Okay, so maybe not the best vacation spot, but he makes a point, right? Like, W-wide, we have laws, police, courts, all that. It's to prevent things from going totally haywire.
That's Hobbes's whole deal. He thinks humans are fundamentally driven by self-interest. Without a strong ruler, a Leviathan, everything falls apart. It's all about self-preservation, looking out for number one.
So even today, are we just seeing different versions of that Leviathan? Instead of a king, it's like systems of law, institutions.
Exactly. The players might change, but that need for order, for some kind of controlling power that seems to be a constant. Wild, right. Okay, so Hobbes is kind of starting us off on a downer here, like, we're all just selfish jerks deep down.
Well, he does have a pretty low view of human nature, that's for sure.
Thankfully, we've got Locke coming in after him. He's writing after the Glorious Revolution, and things are looking a little more optimistic over there.
Definitely a change in tone. Locke's big thing is this idea of natural rights, that even before government enters the picture, we've got inherent rights just by being human.
Like life, liberty, all that jazz.
Exactly. He's not saying government creates those rights. It's supposed to protect them. Night and day difference from Hobbes.
And that's where a social contract comes in, right?
Bingo. It's like a trade-off.
Yeah.
We give up some freedom to a government in exchange for security, for the protection of those other rights.
But doesn't that give governments a lot of power? How does Locke keep that in check?
This is key. He says government's power comes from the consent of the governed. We have to agree to it, otherwise it's illegitimate.
Okay, that part sounds a little more familiar to how we do things now, but hold up, I gotta jump ahead to Nozick for a sec. His book's literally called Anarchy, State, and Utopia. Is he for real with that?
He likes to make you think, that's for sure. Nozick represents this radical libertarian viewpoint. He's all about minimal government.
Minimal like? How minimal are we talking?
Like bare minimum. He thinks the government should only protect individual rights, nothing more. No public health care, no public schools.
Whoa, whoa, hold the phone. How would anything get done in that world? Who's running things?
He'd say private individuals, organizations, it'd be a totally free market. Competition would sort it all out,
Right.
supposedly.
Okay, that is a lot to unpack. Maybe we can circle back to that later. But before we get too far into Nozick's world of, like, privatized fire departments,
I think that's a good idea.
let's bring it back to Locke for a minute. His whole individual rights thing is interesting, but doesn't it kind of ignore the whole common good idea?
You're hitting on a really important point. And it's actually where someone like Martha Nussbaum comes in with a slightly different perspective. She would say it's not enough to just have rights on paper.
Oh,
People need to be able to actually use those rights,
I see what you mean. Like, what good is freedom of speech if you're, like, so busy just trying to survive that you can't even speak up?
Exactly. Nussbaum calls it the capabilities approach. It's about making sure everyone has the basic resources and opportunities to live a decent life.
So not just protecting us from each other, like Hobbes is all about, but actually helping us thrive.
Right. It's about creating a society where everyone has a chance to reach their full potential.
Okay, so that definitely adds a whole other layer to things. I'm kind of seeing those earlier thinkers in a new light now.
It really makes you question those traditional ideas about individual rights, doesn't it?
It totally does. Like, would Hobbes even care about making sure everyone can reach their full potential? He seems pretty focused on just keeping the peace, you know?
That's the heart of the debate, right?
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line between individual freedom and the common good?
And how much responsibility does a government have to actually help people, not just police them?
Those are questions we're still grappling with today.
Mm.
But even within those earlier thinkers, there's some really interesting nuance. Like when you compare Locke and Nozick on property rights, things get spicy.
Oh, yeah, Nozick, Mr. Government, stay out of my business.
Basically. But it's fascinating how he takes Locke's ideas about property and runs with them.
Because Locke's all about protecting life, liberty, A&D, property right.
Right. But Nozick takes it to this whole other level. He sees any kind of wealth redistribution, even for things like public services, as basically theft.
Yeah, he was not a fan of taxes, was he?
Not so much. He'd argue that it's a violation of individual property rights. Even if most people agree to pay taxes, there's always going to be someone who disagrees.
And he'd say that's coercion, plain and simple.
Exactly. Which makes you wonder how he'd feel about, like, universal health care or public education.
Right. Talk about some food for thought, but where does Locke fall on that spectrum? He's not quite as extreme as Nozick, is he?
You're right, Locke's a bit more nuanced. He definitely believes in private property, but he also talks about limits. Like,
Yeah.
we have a moral obligation to help those in need, even if it means giving up some of what we own.
So it's not just every man for himself with Locke.
Not at all. He sees society as this kind of agreement. We benefit from living together, but we also have responsibilities to each other.
It's like that whole tragedy of the commons thing. If we all just take, eventually there's nothing left for anyone.
Exactly. And that's where government comes in, even a limited government like Locke envisioned. It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot, where individual freedom and the common good can coexist.
Which, let's be real, is way easier said than done. It's a debate that's still going strong today.
No doubt. And those tensions, those competing values, they're constantly playing out in the real world, you know.
It's like that quote, I think it was Ben Franklin. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
That's such a perfect way to put it. It's that constant trade-off. Security versus freedom. How much are we willing to give up for a little peace of mind?
It's a question all these thinkers are wrestling with, each in their own way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Nussbaum's focus on capabilities really adds another layer to that, don't you think?
Totally. Because it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about making sure everyone has a chance to live a good life, whatever that means for them.
Okay, so we've got all these big philosophical ideas, individual rights, the social contract, capabilities.
Yeah.
But how does this actually play out in the real world?
Well, that's the thing. These debates aren't just happening in ivory towers. They're shaping our lives every day.
Give me an example. Where do we see this playing out in the news, in politics right now? It's like their ideas are baked into everything, even if we don't realize it.
It's the hidden framework, right? Like, take healthcare. Is it a right that the government should provide no matter what? That feels very Nussbaum, very capabilities focused.
Right. Everyone needs access to healthcare to truly thrive.
Exactly. But then you've got the other side, folks who see it as more of a free market thing.
Which is totally a Nozick move.
Yeah.
Right. Individual choice, minimal government intervention. It gets messy fast.
But it's not just healthcare, right? What about, like, environmental stuff? Should the government step in to protect the environment, even if it puts limits on what people can do with their own land?
Ooh, yeah, that one gets heated.
Because on the one hand, it's the environment that feels like a common good no-brainer.
Totally. But then you've got those property rights that Locke was so big on.
And Nozick would be screaming from the rooftops about government overreach, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. It's like every issue has these echoes of those philosophical debates, you know? It's kind of wild once you start noticing it.
It really is. Like, I'm never going to look at a news headline the same way again. It's, like you said, it's the hidden framework.
And it helps us understand WHY people disagree so passionately about these things.
Yeah. It's not just about the issue itself, it's about these deeper values, these fundamental beliefs about the role of government, what we owe to each other.
Exactly. It goes way deeper than what's on the surface.
This whole deep dive has really got me thinking, like, where do I draw that line? How much individual freedom am I willing to give up for the sake of, like, the greater good?
It's a question that's going to keep popping up no matter what.
Because there's no easy answer, is there? It's not like one of these thinkers had it all figured out.
If only it were that simple. But that's what makes it all so fascinating, right? These debates are still so relevant, so alive.
It's like this ongoing conversation that's been going on for centuries.
And we're all part of it, whether we realize it or not.
So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to do with all this?
I don't know if there's one right answer.
Yeah.
But for me, just being aware of these different perspectives, these different frameworks, it's a game changer.
It's like you've got this whole new toolbox for understanding the world.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, we can start having those tough conversations a little more thoughtfully, a little more productively.
Because we actually understand where the other side is coming from.
Exactly. It's all about empathy, right? Especially when we disagree.
This has been amazing. Seriously, my brain is doing backflips right now in a good way.
Glad to hear it.
To all our listeners, thanks for sticking with us on this wild ride through the origins of government, the ethics of power. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is.
But hey, that's what deep dives are for, right?
Uh-huh.
Keep those brains buzzing, and we'll catch you next time.